Well, good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk here on WIN TV. I'm your host, Denise Rollard Barnes, publisher of the Washington Informer. And today we have a great lineup of guests for you. So I'm so glad you're with us, and hopefully you will tell folks to join us because they don't want to miss this show today. First, we have Reverend Lennox Yearwood Jr., President and CEO of the now in its 20th year Hip Hop Caucus, joining us to talk about environmental justice as we close out Earth Month. And following Reverend Yearwood, we're going to have Florizelle Liser, President and CEO of the Corporate Council on Africa, here to talk about the upcoming U.S.-Africa Business Summit being held in Dallas, Texas next month, actually May 6th through the 9th. You'll want to hear about that. And then finally, we're going to close out Financial Literacy Month with Ben James Brown, Vice President of Financial Health at Wells Fargo, and Mark Harris, Director of Education Activities for the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Omicron Eta Lambda chapter, who are going to discuss a program tailored for students right here in the District of Columbia to help navigate economic challenges and opportunities. So as I said, we've got a great lineup of guests with some great information, and I'm so glad. What makes it most exciting is that you're here with us. Now, I hope you've picked up a copy of this week's Washington Informer. I always like to show the print edition because people always ask, are you still printing a newspaper? And I have to say, yes, we are, because that's what our readers want. And some of us just love to still feel that ink between those pages between our fingers. So we hope you picked up a copy, which inside this edition is our Earth Day, a special, well, actually it's not Earth Day, it's our the WI Bridge edition. And, that's a monthly publication. I'm trying to pull it out for you so that you can see it. And that's the environmental issue. But this week we have our Bridge edition, which is focusing on, again, Earth Day, which was Monday, April the 22nd. And of course, the theme this year is plastic versus people, or people versus plastic. But at any rate, that's what's in this issue, and some very, very wonderful articles highlighting what's going on in the DMV as folks are challenging some of the environmental issues that are impacting our community. I want to say before I go on that the Bridge had a wonderful event just last night at Hill Prince, a nice restaurant, Black-owned restaurant. You all may remember Chef, help me, Chef. Anyway, our wonderful chef is going to come to me in a second, but who owns Hill Prince. If you haven't been there, it's at 1331 H Street Northeast. Chef Rock, I'm sorry, I don't know why I couldn't remember that, but Chef Rock owns Hill Prince at 1331 H Street. It's a great venue for wonderful events. And there were close to about 150 folks there with a great panel. Well, you all heard Lafayette last week interviewing some of the panelists on WIN TV. So they were there last night. Great, wonderful food, great music, sustainable drinks, all of that. It was a wonderful event. And so I just wanted to give the Bridge and the folks that pulled that together a shout out for the first salon. And, Misha, our editor, likes to say it in a different way, salon or something like that. But anyway, we call it a salon. So it was a great event. And we're going to just stay tuned for more like that, because we're going to be doing those in the future. And we certainly want you to come out and join us. So an extension from that is our show today, which I think we have some great guests. Especially Reverend Yearwood, who's going to talk to us about environmental justice, sustainability, and the action that's taking place in our community to make sure that we, as he says, are able to continue not only to survive, but thrive. So again, I hope you picked up a copy of the Informer. Also want you to know that you can get the digital copy by visiting our website at washingtoninformer.com. And please share today's broadcast on your social media platforms and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, Threads, Nextdoor, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Wherever you are, we are. And we want to make sure that you can share all of this great programming that we put together just for you with your friends and colleagues so that they can learn more about the news that impacts our community. We also ask that you would sign up or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Washington Informer TV. No spaces here on YouTube. So please sign up. We are trying to get that to that 1,000 mark. It shouldn't be hard, but it's been a little challenging for us. So we're going to have a little, we're almost there. So we certainly would like for you to help us to get to that goal or even exceed that goal. So we are asking for your support. So before we start our program, let's take a moment to watch this weekly news broadcast brought to you by Curtis Knowles.
This is Curtis Knowles with WIN TV News. Prince George's County is now taking applications for security camera reimbursement roughly 13 months after initially approving the plan. The rebate program offers residents, businesses, and organizations up to $200 for new camera system purchases and $100 to help offset subscription costs to store video footage. The bill that made the program possible is known as the Jay's Act New Law, in honor of the 13-year-old who was murdered in November of 2022. Originally, the rebate program was intended to be countrywide, but budget difficulties forced the county to narrow the scope of where it will be offered. And for now, the program will only be open to certain police-identified priority areas, which include Langley Park, Walker Mill, and Glass Manor. Anyone applying for the rebate must have purchased their cameras after July 1st, 2023, and applications will take between 45 and 90 days to be processed. DC is launching a teacher apprenticeship program that city leaders say will extend the teaching pipeline in some of the most high-demand subject areas. The program will allow DC paraprofessionals and high school graduates to receive a free education while working in a city school. Through a partnership with the University of the District of Columbia and the University of the District of Columbia Community College, aspiring teachers will get coursework to complement on-the-job training. OSSC is expected to start enrolling candidates this fall, and the first cohort will likely include up to 50 people. Additional grant money could be used to increase the number of participants, and participants who graduate from the program will be eligible for an OSSC educator credential in elementary education, special education, or early childhood education. Legislation forcing TikTok's parent company to sell the video sharing platform or face a ban in the U.S. received President Biden's official sign-off Wednesday, but the newly minted law could be in for an uphill battle in court. The app's China-based owner ByteDance has already promised to sue, calling the measure unconstitutional. The law.
All right, looks like we missed a little bit of that last segment, but we want to thank Curtis for that broadcast and for bringing us up to date on news in the Informer and other news that we think is really important. So before we bring on our guest, Reverend Lennox Yearwood, again, President and CEO of the Hip Hop Caucus, let's take a look at this video.
This is Curtis Knowles with.
What's going on, y'all? This is Vic Mensa wishing a very happy and powerful 20th anniversary to the Hip Hop Caucus. 20 years of important work. I've been blessed to be working with the Hip Hop Caucus for almost 10 years now. And keep the movement going. We need y'all. Yes, sir.
Wow, 20 years. It's my pleasure to welcome to Let's Talk Reverend Lennox Yearwood, Jr., President and CEO of the Hip Hop Caucus. Welcome to Let's Talk.
My dear sister, it's so good to see you.
It's good to see you. You know, we've been trying to have this gathering for a little while, and you know, the time is always right. And
well, today is Arbor Day, so happy Arbor Day. You gotta,
thank you.
You gotta do this and then go plant a tree.
I was about to say, tell folks what Arbor Day is.
Arbor Day is when we encourage planting a tree, and particularly for urban greening. We love that. If you are particularly in DC or wherever you are around the country, make sure you get out there and plant a tree so we can make sure and create, more beautiful communities as well as cleaner air for our folks.
Tell us, Reverend Yearwood, how did you kind of get into this whole movement. I have to say, I listened to your interview this morning on WPFW, so I got to give a shout out to a sister station. It was a great interview. I learned a lot about your history, and but I kind of missed the connection about living in New Orleans. I mean, you went to
Yeah.
Howard, but you talked about was it cancer? What's
Cancer
it called?
Alley.
Cancer Alley. And what is it that triggered your passion to get into this whole environmental justice movement?
Yeah. Well, first things first, I mean, 68% of African Americans live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant, causing us to have asthma, cancer, emphysema. And fortunately, yesterday, the first Black man who is in charge of the EPA, Michael Regan, who went to HBCU, the wrong HBCU, he went to A&T, but he went to HBCU. In that regard, put forth legislation to stop that. That's the end of the process. Yes, there was an amazing day about how we curb pollution from power plants. But fast forward how we got into this, for me, we were working in DC. Hip Hop Caucus had just started. We had just got finished doing our work around electoral work in 2004. People knew us from Vote or Die and the Hip Hop Summits. And we were doing that work around getting out the vote. And then in 2005, I was here in DC, and Hurricane Katrina hit my home state community in Louisiana. And I sat, like most of us, watching my community literally drowning and then left behind in the richest country in the world. And that for me was like, well, hold on. Why is it that these storms are what they're doing? And then did more investigation. And we realized that our communities are facing the climate crisis first and worst. And from that moment on, I mean, I saw Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore, but I realized that the climate crisis wasn't just environment, but also white supremacy. And if we can connect the dots and be more intersectional environmentalists, meaning understand that racial justice is climate justice and climate justice is racial justice, we would get involved. And you mentioned, then we begin to look more further, because I'm from Louisiana. I didn't really know about Cancer Alley. I mean, I heard about it, didn't really know about it. And for those who are listening or watching, Cancer Alley is an 85-mile stretch of land between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, in which they're putting petrochemical companies and fertilizer companies, everything you can imagine, they're putting there, but it causes the highest rate of cancer in the country. So much where our people are dying. And it's so sinister because the fossil fuel industry, not only did they put these chemicals in Cancer Alley, but they find former plantation sites to put the plants on where they can just put pollution in these communities. So from that moment, we have begun getting involved. And then we noticed, to be honest, that it was mostly white people, honestly. People from California and Vermont who were talking about, nothing wrong. I mean, listen, I don't got a pair of Birkenstocks, but I'm just saying, I mean, it wasn't our community engaged, and we felt obligated at Hip Hop Caucus to educate our community about the climate crisis, how to get more engaged, and how to be the solution to creating what needs to be done so we can transition from fossil fuels to clean energy.
That's one of the questions that I think about often. I mean, one thing I always say is that I consider people of African descent the original environmentalists. I mean, that's one reason why we were so valuable to this country, because we understood how to use the earth and the sun and the seasons, and we were so connected to nature that we understood how to use it to to support our lives, our lifestyles, and those who we worked for. And so I'm wondering, because I'm wondering if there's a way you can, is it a myth, or can you demystify the myth that Black folks really don't care about the environment, that we're victims of it, but we're not protectors? Can you, because the Hip Hop Caucus, I think your organization, is a face that's different than what we often see.
Yeah.
Folks in the environmental movement, but where are we as a race of people? Are we just victims, or what are we doing to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's important for people to know that our communities are most impacted, as I said before, by not only the climate crisis, but by pollution, and that happens here in America, or that also happens on the continent, happens in the Caribbean and the global South. And so we're impacted, and we're the ones least causing the crisis. So that's also
Mhm.
important to know that we're not the ones who are putting out the pollution and putting the carbon in the atmosphere. The point is this: that when the climate crisis, when you look back to the first, this is Earth Month and the first Earth Day, when Earth Day was first started in 1970, um, it was more of a protest, but even in that process, when it was created, it siloed itself from other movements. It siloed
Mhm.
itself from the queer movement that was happening in New York, the feminist womanist movement that was happening, the Black Pride movement. This is post Dr. King's assassination. So when you look at that time frame, they kind of siloed themselves. So even though it was everyone's problem, it really it became a problem. It was more around tree hugging and conservation. And so people just figure, okay, well, that's not really our issue. Fast forward, literally to probably when the Markey Waxman bill was being put forth in Congress in 2011, we realized that, hold on, we're the ones who are most impacted by the climate crisis. And our community began to get more engaged and more involved. And now that has come full circle, in which environmental justice is a key component to federal legislation. And even furthermore, now billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, are now being put forth into our community. That's the section there. Because the one thing I don't want us to miss right now is that, yes, we suffer because of the climate crisis, but we can be the solution, and we can also create economic empowerment, because with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS Acts, there is billions of dollars that has to go to our communities. And so we are now also missing out on the benefit of being the solution. And so we
Mhm.
want to fix that as well, to not only not be the ones who are suffering, but be the ones who can also be the solution to the crisis that's happening in our communities.
So if you look at our communities, I mean, we feel pretty blessed because we have had for the last 2 years a very engaged environmental writer, who's talked about things that
Yes,
are happening right here on the ground
most
in
definitely.
Washington D.C., Southeast. Everything from lead in water to lead in paint, the impact on children that are suffering, the largest number of children suffering from asthma, all those kinds of things, and issues that residents are having that the city is being forced to resolve, like putting dumps in neighborhoods, what have you. So if you were to, talk to folks in Washington, D.C., and advise them on what you think is one of the biggest climate problems we're facing here and what we could do about it, what would that response be?
Well, I want to get an answer. I want to give a shout out to the Washington Informer, because I think that how you guys have been handling the environment is critical. I think that you have been stellar in that. You actually broke one of the biggest climate stories last year in our community at the March on Washington. I was only one of the few speakers who spoke on climate. And then you noticed that there were plenty of nothing. I mean, we want a minute of conversations, but to have only 3 to 5 minutes, the Washington Informer noticed that, put that forth, and then I saw that other papers and outlets were picking that story up. It was because of you breaking that story and noticing, and again, being at the March on Washington, seeing the disparities, seeing those stories not being connected, you brought that. I would say right now, the most important thing is to continue to reduce petrochemicals in our communities and petrochemical expansion.
And when you say
Um,
petrochemicals now, I
mhm.
mean, what does that mean from a layman's standpoint? What are we
Yeah,
talking about?
well, petrochemicals are pretty much oil and gas.
Mhm.
That's pretty much what that is. And oil and gas refineries are in our communities. And the fossil fuel industry, which realizes that they are losing. I mean, they realize now that they are going to run out of a product. And so they have to transition. And so one of those transitions is into petrochemicals and into plastics. And so, which is, people who don't know, plastics are mostly made out of oil and gas. And there's certain things we need out of plastic, but we don't need everything out of plastic. We just be very, very clear on that. And so the number one thing we need for us is to stop the expansion of petrochemicals throughout this country, because that again is mostly in our communities throughout. Vinyl chloride, which was the thing that exploded in East Palestine, is a petrochemical. And that's the thing that was created in Houston and then shipped through East Palestine, Ohio, which had exploded. But we need to reduce that. The second thing I think, which is very important, is that we really need to ensure that the money that is being put forth out of the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that our community is benefiting, is educated, and understand that literally the billions of dollars that is coming through our community right now, that we are there to accept those dollars, to understand what it means to use those dollars to create from EV charging stations, solar, to be able to educate our community on the climate crisis. That's number two. And then three, I think the third thing that's really important is clean air and clean water. My hat here is about Flint. This it marks 10 years since 2014, since Flint had the Flint water crisis, and they still don't have clean air. Right. And so in our communities, from Baltimore to North to DC, to Flint to LA, we need to make sure that we have clean air and clean water.
No, it's interesting because a while ago I took one of those rides on the Anacostia River here in DC. And we were told that one of the biggest pollutants to the Anacostia River, of all things, was dog poop.
Yeah.
And so with the increase of dogs that we're seeing, I mean, we got dog lovers, I know, but with the increase of those animals now, and people that don't clean up behind them, it's the poop that's, dirtying up the river. Who knew?
And then people put it in plastic. Exactly. That's the combination. So those are a combination of things. I think what I have seen, without a doubt, is particularly young people understanding the importance of what's going on.
Right.
And I think they understand that we have to do something about the climate crisis. They don't have time for games. They realize now that the fact that we are limiting ourselves on clean air, on clean water, that we are literally putting ourselves in a position of having a world of wildfires and droughts and tornadoes and hurricanes, that for them, even now, they realize that we have to do all we can. And I would say, what's important, you say what could be done on the Washington level, I would say to everyone who just listening, listen, 100 years from now, 21, 24, more likely a lot of us won't be here. But the fact that we can help us to transition from fossil fuel to clean energy will help that next generation have clean air and clean water.
So a lot of young folks don't know how to find their way to that organization where they can actually get involved and become engaged. Tell them how they can connect with the Hip Hop Caucus. What is it? How can they become? Is it a membership? How do they get engaged with hip hop?
Well,
Hip Hop Caucus.
A few things. They can text climate to 79591. That's the first way. Text climate to 79591. And then they can follow us on social media at Hip Hop Caucus. They can also go to our website and see all the stuff that we've done. You're right. We've done, we do so many things from media. We have a new documentary out with Wanda Sykes that's now in the film festivals. There's music we've done around the issue with Common and Neo and so many others, and El Varner and Crystal Waters. And so I think that they can get involved that way. I think that we've launched season 6 of The Coolest Show, which you can listen to today, which is important, our podcast series that really puts forth solutions for BIPOC communities addressing climate and environmental injustices. And so they can go to thecoolestshow.com for that. But I would say the most important thing is just to make sure that climate and environmental justice is a part of the conversation in this year's election, and to make sure they get out and vote. I think that's probably the most important thing that they can do.
Yeah, it's going back to the roots. That's where the solutions are. That's one thing that's an easy thing to do, is just to go out and vote and make sure that those issues are on the agenda. We got a Democratic convention coming up. Actually, Democratic, Republican, and
Oh,
I guess
yeah,
independent conventions coming up. And we should be having our ears open to where the climate issues stand on the agendas of all those parties, so we know who to vote for. Correct?
that's right. No, the narrative that climate movement is only about saving the polar bears and rainforests is missing the fact that pollution from fossil fuels contributes to the ruin of our planet. And we need that whoever politicians are, they need to understand that people are suffering extreme health consequences and are being displaced from their homes because of the climate crisis. And this must be something that must be brought forth every politician. But fortunately, we see that some are more interested than others because the fossil fuel industry is also paying off a lot of politicians as well.
Okay. Something we have to pay a lot of attention to. And Reverend Yearwood, I just want to thank you so much for being with us, for bringing this, home, for helping us to understand how important and critical this issue is to, as you said before, what is it, our survival
That's right.
and to
No,
protect
yeah.
us from extinction? Is that what
Yeah,
the?
no. Young people understand. They understand that in the 20th century, our parents fought for equality. But now in the 21st century, they're still fighting for equality, but they're now fighting for existence.
Right.
And this issue is our lunch counter moment for the 21st century.
Wow. Thank you so much for being with us today and for
No,
sharing
thank you for
that.
having me. Thank
And
you
looking
for
forward to having you back again. We're not
most.
we're not gonna put this issue down. We're gonna stick with it as long as we have to, because we just have to.
We have no
So,
choice.
yeah,
Thank you. No, I'll come back
exactly.
every single time.
All righty, appreciate you. Have a good one. Yes, that was Reverend Lennox Yearwood, President and CEO of the Hip Hop Caucus. We can't talk enough about the climate and the environment and the impact that it's having on our communities. And so I really am honored that he was willing to spend some time with us today during Earth Month. But, this is a 24/7, 365-day a year issue. And so just glad to have him with us. And also now we're going to move on to our next guest, Florizelle Liser, who is President and CEO of the Corporate Council on Africa. But before we do so, we're going to watch this brief video.
Corporate Council on Africa proudly presents the 16th edition of the US-Africa Business Summit, taking place from the 6th to the 9th of May. After 2 consecutive years of gatherings on the African continent, Morocco in 2022 and Botswana in 2023, the US-Africa Business Summit returns to the United States.
Well, we just finished talking about the importance of the climate and the environment and why Black folks should care. Florizelle Liser is going to come and tell us why we should care about Africa and the role that the Corporate Council on Africa is. Oh, you got it set up really well. Fantastic. But talk about why we should even care about Africa and doing business in Africa and having this summit right here in Dallas, Texas. Flory, welcome to Let's Talk, and tell us why should we be interested in opportunities in Africa?
So first of all, thank you to the Washington Informer. Denise, thank you for having me as a part of this show today. As people of color, the diaspora, we absolutely should care about Africa. And there is a perception of Africa which is unfortunately not accurate. Too many times on the news, with the exception of media folks like yourself, what we see about Africa is negative. People starving, conflicts and wars, etc. And yes, Africa does have some challenges, but there are lots and lots of successes in terms of the continent. We have the youth who are, the growing demographic of Africa. They are tech savvy. They are the young entrepreneurs of Africa who are driving those economies and also connecting with US companies, buying our products and our services. And so CCA, as a 30-year-old business association, with both US and African members, companies who are both multinationals as well as SMEs. We are sending out the word. We have been focused on what the opportunities are in Africa to grow your business and to grow the economies, to create jobs both there and in the US. And so our members are excited about the opportunity to come together with business leaders from across Africa, as well as with heads of state, ministers, and other decision makers. We're coming to Dallas, Texas, May 6th to 9th for our US Africa Business Summit, and very excited to be bringing not only the Africans who are leading on their side, the public and the private sectors, but also from the US side, we have top companies from around the US, as well as a stellar delegation coming from the United States government. So why Africa? I'll just end by saying that there is no major issue that the world faces today, including climate, as Reverend Yearwood was just talking about, to addressing poverty, to education, to food security. There are no issues in the world that are critical that you can solve without partnering with Africa, without a focus on Africa. And so this is why we tell people that what we're doing is really critical. And we're inviting everyone to come to our U.S. Africa Business Summit in the next, 10 days or so,
Yes.
and join there to have a conversation about all the sectors that are vibrant and are driving economic growth all across Africa, as well as in the United States.
You know, one of the things that I think is such an injustice when it comes to telling Africa's story is that we don't really know how progressive the continent is. And, you know, I think back, and this is a really minor thing, but for me, it was a real aha moment when cell phones first came out. Right. And, you know, here in the United States, you didn't give your cell phone number out to anybody because, you know, if they called you, it was going to cost. And, you know, you called them, but they couldn't call you. When I went to South Africa, it was so different. You know, everybody, that was their main means of communication. So everybody shared that information. And look at where we are today. Right.
Absolutely.
We don't even have landline phones anymore. They didn't have them, but now
Right.
they have a source of communications. And so I'm thinking, as I read things about, you know, different countries in Africa, from banking to agriculture to, like I said, finance, they're so progressive. And so with this summit, I think, you know, what you're doing now is showing what those opportunities are to really engage and connect. So tell us what is the main objective of the summit, and also why Dallas?
Well, let's start with why Dallas. So Dallas is, you know, the center of the country. You have Fortune 500, Global 100 companies there. One of the ones I want to talk about is the fact that our chairman of the board of Corporate Council on Africa is a diaspora African. He's a Nigerian American. He runs a company called Access, which is a health tech company, doing, you know, incredibly well, and not just in the US, but, you know, globally. And so, you know, we're in Texas for that reason, but also, you know, people don't know that Texas has the largest of all the states in the US. Texas has the largest diaspora population. And the city of Dallas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, is the third largest diaspora community in the United States after New York and Washington, D.C.
Define diaspora for us, Flori. Define that.
Well, it's people of color, diaspora Africans, but I think in the sense that, you know, people who are born in Africa, so the newer generation born in Africa and coming here now. And
Okay.
so not necessarily African Americans like myself, but more the diaspora African community. And so, you know, there are so many people of the diaspora community of Africa that are in the Dallas region and in Texas more broadly. And so, one of the things that we want to do is to talk about how diaspora Africans, as well as African American SMEs, women-owned SMEs, youth-owned SMEs, can connect to each other and do business. And we tell folks that, lots of US companies, large and small, are in Africa doing good. But the bottom line is that they're also there because they want to do well. And some of the fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. And, everyone in the world who's trying to grow their business, they're in Africa for a good reason. But you were just talking about the perceptions before and what's happened with cell phones. And, you have a whole tech revolution that's happening on the continent. A lot of the latest apps and latest tech applications are being developed on the continent, and they're sharing it with us.
Yes.
That's one more reason why we want to shine the light on Africa. And then I'll say this, Denise. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, doing business in Africa. Oh my goodness." And I'll say to them, "Well, wait a minute. Africa, which part of Africa are you talking about? Which of the 54 countries are you talking about? Africa is not a country, it is a continent." Yeah. And, if you're concerned about one particular country or one segment of a country, maybe that's rational. But to be concerned about, Africa and doing business there, that risk perception is actually not one that aligns with reality. And for those of us who go to the continent all the time, I show people pictures and they think that they are seeing, San Francisco or, New York City or whatever. And I'm like, no, this is Accra, or this is, Joburg. Or so again, the perceptions of Africa and of doing business in Africa is something that we are definitely working on, so that we can make sure that our stakeholders, both U.S. and African businesses and government leaders, know just what the potential is for our partnership.
I want to ask you who some of the key speakers that you are going to have at the event, and maybe some of the topics. And I'm just going to say, we just had the NFL draft yesterday, right? And where is the NFL going? To Africa. So, and I think you have a panel that talks about that as well. So tell us what folks can expect and if they can still register for the conference.
Oh, absolutely. We still have room, not lots, because it's been filling up every day, but please do go online and register. We're at www.usafricabizsummit.com. And you can go in the chat. We'll put it up in the chat so people can go there. But it's usafricabizsummit.com. And you are still able to register for the conference. So in terms of who's going to be there, and then we'll talk about some of the topics we're going to cover, including the financing and investment opportunities in sports and the creative arts, right? Lots of shows, you see now, Netflix and Amazon Prime and other US platforms, streaming platforms that are using African content. And we love it over here, right? So that's an area where the opportunity to invest and to expand African content into what's streamed in the United States and worldwide is there. But we'll also be talking about energy and energy transition. Your former guest was, focused on that, the climate issues. But for Africa, their natural resources of oil and gas in particular are, tremendous. And they still have to develop that so that the people of Africa will have access to electricity. That's an issue which in this transition, people need to think about. But also, they have solar, they have hydro. There are many things that are on the continent where they're able to do that. Agribusiness is another area and sector we'll be focused on. Africa has something like 60% of the arable land in the world that is not yet cultivated.
Wow.
So when we're thinking about, what Africa can offer the world, Africa can offer the world food security, right? So investing in developing the agricultural sector there, and then value added agriculture, not just the raw products, but the value added products that are needed in the global food supply. Africa can play, a huge role in that. Health is another area. We have at least 4 or 5 sessions on different aspects of health. Manufacturing in Africa, during the COVID period, the Africans not being able to produce it meant that they often were the last in line to have access to those medicines. And so now we're looking at that and what the African can do in the health supply chains, not only for pharmaceutical products, but also for medical equipment. So, there are just lots of areas that we're going to be focused on and talking about during the summit. We have a session on SMEs. We have a session on, aviation.
Yeah, you keep mentioning SMEs, and I didn't stop before to ask you to share with the audience what that means.
Small and medium-sized enterprises.
Okay, all right.
And sometimes people put an M in front of the MSME for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And those are the company in the U.S. those are companies that grow our economy with 50 or fewer employees.
Yeah.
In Africa, you have a lot of SMEs and MSMEs that may have 10 people, but they're still driving the economic growth there. But I wanted to share, Denise, some of the folks that are coming. We have African heads of state, like a president, right?
Mm-hmm.
And prime ministers coming from, I won't mention their names, but the countries. So
right.
Angola, the president of Angola, Botswana, Cabo Verde, or Cape Verde, as some people would call it, Lesotho, Liberia, Malawi, Mozambique, Nigeria, Sierra Leone. We've got either heads of state or vice presidents or prime ministers coming from all those countries I mentioned. And then we have ministers of trade and health and ICT and digital. I didn't mention that. That's another topic we're focused on, is the whole digital economy that's so important for development in Africa and everywhere else in the world, including the US. And so we have ministers coming from probably more than 20 or 25 countries from across Africa. And then on the US side, we're really excited. Yesterday, the White House announced that the head of the US government delegation to our US Africa Business Summit will be Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield.
Yes, okay.
Our ambassador to the United Nations, and a longtime Africanist. She's been ambassador in different places, Liberia, etc., but who now is playing a global role. And that shows you how important Africa is for the US, that they will have Linda Thomas Greenfield coming. But we also have the head of the Millennium Challenge Corporation coming, the head of the US Trade and Development Agency coming. I think we have the Deputy Secretary of Commerce coming. Key people. Oh, and the chairperson of the U.S. Export-Import Bank is going to be there. And so, and the number 2 person, the deputy CEO of the U.S. Development Finance Corporation, DFC, they're going to be there. I'm sure I have missed someone.
Yeah,
well, many top people coming from the U.S. government who will be meeting with these African heads of state and leaders. And last but not least, we have to talk about the private sector. We have CEOs and senior executives coming from U.S. and African companies. So we're very excited about that. We expect somewhere around 1,200 to 1,500 people for the summit. So we're really excited about that.
But to save you, I'll say it like my dad used to say it. you have Lottie Dottie and everybody who is somebody is coming to the summit, no matter how big or small. And I like the fact that you're focused on the SMEs, since we talked about that, because you don't have to be a big corporation to come and find opportunities there at the summit in Africa. And it's great that it's being hosted now this year in the United States, because I know the last summit was in Botswana. How can people learn more about the Corporate Council in Africa? I know we're going to put the your website up so that people can go to the website. But can anybody be a member? What does it take to be a member of the
So
CCA?
we have different levels of membership in recognition of the fact that everyone that has an interest in Africa is not a multinational corporation.
Right.
So we have 3 levels of membership. And so for smaller companies, it's 5,000 a year. We have mid caps, 10,000 a year, and then the big guys are 25,000 a year. But I would say that probably 40% of our members are small and mid-sized companies.
Wonderful.
Which I think also tells the story about who is driving the U.S. economy, frankly, as well as our engagement with our economic engagement with Africa. Wow. So we welcome companies of all sizes, and we also welcome individuals to come and be a part of the summit. We don't have individual membership in CCA, but we find that we open our events to like the summit to lots of people, whether they are part of a corporation or not. Sometimes they just have a strong interest in the continent, want to learn more, want to meet people. And, our current motto is that we provide the access, connections, and insight for anyone who is interested in doing business on the continent. And this summit, we're telling people that we are bringing the best of Africa to meet with the best of America.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so very much for taking time out. I know that you all are busy trying to tie up loose ends and have get this conference on the road or get it going. I'm hoping, Flory, that at some point, I know we'll be there covering, but I would love to have maybe a U.S. company representative who actually did a partnership, is engaged with doing business on the continent or vice versa, to show that it's not just one of those networking events, but it's a real business growth event. So we will talk about that, and once we get past.
And we have exhibitors there. I didn't mention that we have an exhibition area, and we're going to have at least 20 or 30 different companies from U.S. and Africa who will be showcasing what they do, the products and the services. So that's another opportunity, Denise, for you and your team to come and to talk to people who are there. They'll be open to having you come to their booths and meet with them and find out what they're doing. But let me just thank the Washington Informer for connecting us to your community of media partners from all across the country. This is very important to us, and we're delighted that you are a media partner for CCA, for our U.S. Africa Business Summit, and look forward to connecting more as we go forward.
Well, it's important for us, and you all are a conduit for that we create these bridges and that we, connect more, because I think our future depends on it. So thank you for all the great work you're doing, and looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
See you soon in Dallas.
All righty.
Okay.
Thanks much. So I tell you, we've been talking about the climate, we've talked about Africa, and now we're going to come really and talk about our financial health and wellness. So it's my pleasure to bring on Ben James Brown, Vice President of Financial Health at Wells Fargo, and Mark Harris, Director of Education Activities for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, who is wearing that black and gold today. So,
yes.
Everybody in the Informer, seem like all the men are well, except for one, are Alpha. So they would be very, very happy to see you today, Mark. But thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And hopefully you've, saw some connections in some of our prior conversations. But let's talk about what the fraternity, what Alpha Phi Alpha is doing in the area of financial education. What is the Finance Academy that has been established?
All right. So in 2022, when we were initiated, I took over the role of Director of Educational Activities. And one of the mandates that we got from our chapter leadership and just the demands we've heard at large was the gaps of financial literacy. And so Ben James and I put our heads together. We came up with the Alpha Finance Academy, and we're using one of the parts of the program is the hands-on banking experience that Ben James will talk about. But we wanted to recognize that there's a heavy demand and pressure on teachers just to provide everything in the school day. And we wanted to push in as brothers just to give our expertise around financial education and also lend our presence in our various careers. And so we connect those two things, the hope of what you can become, and also the financial lessons that you need to kind of get to those steps. And also we found that this program links children and the young people really to understand the sacrifices that their parents and others make for them through the experience. So this has really just been a 2 years worth of like just going out and evangelizing this message.
But I mean, Ben James, maybe you can also sort of share, what initiated this idea? What was the impetus to say, this is an area we need to focus on for young people? And who are those young people? Are they elementary, middle, high school?
Yeah, it's education for all. I mean, our aims are to improve the financial health of our young adults and youth, the same in the District of Columbia. And I'll say there are several programs out there that we have around economic empowerment, workforce development. But let's be real, you can have someone who's making $1 million and be $1 million in debt, really good jobs and getting our youth prepared for what life is going to look like. But they don't know how to manage their funds. And so I think it's the one common language that we have, around the world is money and money management. And if you don't know, then unfortunately, you'll be one of those folks who are questioning all the time, what could I have done differently? And so the hands-on banking platform that the Omicron Eta Lambda chapter leverages, powered by Wells Fargo, is a real-world money management simulation. And it's designed for students, but it's designed for young adults as well that teach important financial education concepts, such as budgeting, comparing, shopping, evaluating needs, wants, trade-offs in a relevant and an engaging way. So we have a lot of fun. And during this activity, our students are assigned profiles that detail income, their careers, family information. You'll have some youth who will be married with 4 kids, and they have to go throughout this simulation, these 13 stations that mimic real life experiences and expenses such as clothing and groceries and housing. And at the end of the experience, we want them to come out with some money. Some don't, but it's a really great way to have conversations around this conceptually. And then for our adults and our college students, it's a really great way for them to reground themselves in what's most important and how do I start doing things a bit differently so that I can save and just have a different discipline and habit, around my money management.
So this is a digital platform, and
Yes.
is that what I'm hearing? Okay. And so
Yeah.
how would a young person, a parent, how do they engage with this? Do we just I'm sure we're going to put that up in a minute, but is there a website that we go to, or?
Yes. So
Okay.
handsonbanking.org offers an array of programs and presentations for teacher practitioners and for consumers alike to go on and get real world experience and tutorials around financial health and skills that they need to build. And anyone can use these. It's a free resource. It's educational. It's for non-commercial use, but it teaches these valuable skills. And the Omicron Eta Lambda chapter with Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, we've taken this curriculum to bestow all of that knowledge into the schools that we serve. Specifically because it's Financial Literacy Month in April, Denise, what we are focused on is reaching 1,906 youth, our founding year, to make sure that those youth are educated around what's most important. And you have to start young. You know, when you think about equity in this world, I remember when my son first went to college, and he got that first piece of mail that was a credit card. And I
Yes.
forgot that he just turned 18. And so I said, well, let's look at his credit score. He went and pulled up my FICO, and he had a 700 credit score. Now, that's not the norm. The thing is, I was educated around what was going to help boost his credit when he was 12 and adding him onto my first credit card. So knowledge without, action doesn't equate to most. And you can't just educate someone around financial literacy and expect them to improve. It takes that action that's followed with it. And because I was able to do that for him, he was able to move that needle quite a bit. And then we were able to have a conversation about it. But we have so many youth, especially here in the District of Columbia, who are not armed with those resources.
Right.
And so this is where Alpha said, you know what, we can plant our feet in the ground and make a big impact for our students here in the District of Columbia, which is what we're doing today.
That's fantastic. Mark, did you want to add something?
Oh no, I just wanted to echo that financial literacy is vital to address those systemic socioeconomic disparities. And Alpha Phi Alpha, we develop leaders, promote brotherhood, academic excellence, and while providing service and advocacy. And financial literacy is a big service what we're doing with the Finance Academy, but it's also the advocacy, letting everyone know like we're doing this work with the students that are furthest from opportunity, but they need to see that, hey, the opportunities need to start coming in and that people want to work towards these opportunities. So, I mean, just when the opportunities come, we want to at least know that our students know what to do when that first credit card comes when they go to college, or they can at least remember the simulation and understand how these choices really make a difference, and not just seeing that big check and thinking, oh, I got this, X amount of money, that has to take care of all these needs. And again, after every scenario we've done, the students just are in awe of the real world because we've made it good for them, for a lot of them, and not despite the challenges they face. Like all intents and purposes, they don't always think about these things, and so they really appreciate it. I've not had one student that was bored or said this wasn't worth it. They really get engaged, and at the end, like Ben James said, when they don't have money, I just kind of say, well, it's unfortunate, that's life. But I also let them know that they can't judge or make any type of, because I'm like, that does happen. And it happens more often than not, like in the example that James said earlier. So this is a very essential program, and I'm glad to be a part of it and, is keeping it going forward.
So you, it sounds like you do have schools that you're working with in the DMV. You want to tell us a couple of them?
Yes, we started with this in 2022 with Ron Brown College Prep High School. We've also been at Roosevelt High School, Columbia Heights Education Campus, Murch Elementary. So we've got elementary on there. We've got a couple of schools coming up that we're just we're trying to make sure we meet the demand because it's very.
So that was what I was going to ask. Is it that people reach out and say, look, we want you to have the program. We want to adopt this program at our school. Do they reach out to you and invite you in? Is that how it works? Okay.
Absolutely. And I'll say this is a really great platform for those who are listening. If this is a need that you feel like your school would benefit from, and I think every school would benefit from something like this, that you can reach out to Mark or myself to make sure that we can get this on your campus. Teachers love this. And I think what's most important is this being delivered to youth, and they can see themselves in the folks who are delivering it. That makes such an impact and a difference in absorption of information. Again, you can't educate someone out of poverty. And so we need to make sure that that folks are able to see themselves in the folks who are presenting the information, and that they're doing it in a relevant, mindful, and deliberate, way. And I think that that's what the Alpha Finance Academy does for the students that we touch here in DC.
There are a lot of churches in the area too that are trying to develop youth programs. Is this something that a church could do as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. Or organization that works with young people?
Any organization. And so we want to make it easy for them. And
Mhm.
so you can definitely tag an Alpha from the Omicron Eta Lambda chapter, where we can go out and we can deploy our resources, our time, dedicated to that organization so that they can too get this type of information. But for anyone, again, across the nation, they can go to handsonbanking.org and they can pull up this curriculum as well, so that they can have the same experiences that we're offering to the youth right here in the District of Columbia.
And for every organization or any organization that wants to utilize the program, would they have to have, or would a Alpha member be available to walk them through it, or can they do this on their own?
They can do it on their own,
Okay.
but I'll tell you, you know that, and Mark said it at the very beginning of this, almost 118 years of developing leaders, promoting brotherhood and academic excellence. The most important part of our fraternity is the providing service and advocacy for our community. So we want to be out there. We want to walk the walk and talk the talk, and we want to hold your hand through one of the most important things that folks need to learn, experience, and have savvy around, which is financial education.
Well, I know one of your honorary, I won't say honorary, but one of your honored members would be so proud of what you were doing, because that's the path that he was on before he was unfortunately taken away from us. Is that's Dr. Martin Luther King, who talked about financial liberation and economic freedom. And so it sounds like you're walking the path that has been laid out for you. And providing that service to the community. We think, and I'm going to let you go in a minute, but because of the wide-ranging incidents that we're having throughout, not only in the district but across the country, with stores closing because kids are coming through and doing what kids shouldn't be doing, but what they do, not understanding the economics of it, right? So I'm thinking that this is one way of addressing that as well. When people recognize, what crime costs, and how that increases prices and makes things more difficult for those who want to do things the right way. I don't know if you get into that, but I mean, the education to me really has a ripple effect, beneficial
It,
ripple effect.
it absolutely does, and I know we're short on time, but I'll tell you some of the stories that we share in the simulation. One of the examples that you just gave, when students are in a room, I typically go through and I count the price of shoes that they have on, and majority of the time, you have $1,000 in that room just in shoes from a couple of individuals. You have a couple of $1,000s inside of the classroom, and that couple of $1,000s is a down payment on a home. And folks, and then we start to talk about the value in home and how that can create generational wealth, and that you too can have it just with some additional focus and disciplines, and changes of your behavior right now. A lot of times they just don't know. And
Right.
so our opportunity is to be there to dispel some of these myths around what you can and cannot, do, that you can do it, and that we're here to help you along that journey.
Right. And to get rid of that excuse that there's a very valid one, and is that nobody ever told me.
Yeah.
So it's good that you all are there, that you have this program. I really hope folks will reach out and, take advantage of what the fraternity is doing. And I thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing it with our audience.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure.
All righty. Well, you all have a good day. Go out there and help us to make some money.
Yes, we'll do.
Have a
And
good one.
help to build our communities. All right. Take care. Well, this show was so informative for me, and it's we've run over, but we do that from time to time because the information is so important. And so I've learned a lot, and I hope that you have. I want to thank you so very much for watching Let's Talk today. We hope you found our discussions insightful and informative, and we want to extend a special thanks to our guests who were with us today. We certainly did enjoy the conversation. And we just want you to know that, we want you to tune in every week. Make sure that next month you join us. May is Older Americans Month, so we will be talking about issues that we think are important to those of us who are fortunate enough to be aging. Remember, that's a blessing because it could be another way. So we're going to have a great time with some Older Americans Month programming. And until then, we just want you to stay informed and stay curious. I want you to have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.